Good morning. Good night. Whatever time of day it is, I hope that you are doing absolutely fantastic. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. I am so glad that you have joined me today. It's me, Auntie K, and in today's video I thought I would do something a little bit different than I usually do, which is a writing workshop where I just kind of go through and let you guys know my absolute top tips for writing. It's gonna kind of mainly be for like fiction writing, like novels or even like short stories it could work for. I know that this video is not going to apply to everyone, so if that is the case, you can either click off or hopefully you can just be relaxed with like a whisper ramble or something. I don't know. But I love writing. I have been writing like literally as long as I can remember, and I absolutely adore it. I took quite a few like creative writing classes in college and throughout high school, and I've just been writing novels for fun like for years. So I thought that I would gather together my top tips, and I'll be going through everything from like lack of motivation, like where to start, how to like even begin a story, for like inspiration, going through like character development, scene work itself, and just kind of some general advice for writing. So these are things that I've gathered from just like learning myself. I've gotten a lot of things off of Pinterest, I'm not gonna lie. Pinterest has a ton of really, really great resources for writing, so I recommend you do that. And then just like classes I've taken and stuff. The first kind of category that I'm gonna go through, and I am gonna timestamp if you want the comments below, or in the description box. So if you want that, go there. But I'm gonna start like for inspiration and writer's block. So just kind of how to get out there what I use for inspiration. Personally, for inspiration, I literally find inspiration everywhere, whether that's from something that somebody says, if it's something I witnessed, like I just kind of, it sounds creepy, but like I'll just people watch, like back when like COVID was not a thing, like, you know, just be like sitting at the mall and just watching people and watching them interact, because ultimately stories are just about people, and so kind of just watching how people interact and things like that can be super helpful. I get inspiration from songs, from photos, from everything that you can imagine, so just be keeping an eye out for those things. And if you have something, write it down, because you think that you're gonna remember it. 99% of the time you will not remember it, so just thank yourself later in the future. But the first thing I always do when I am starting like a new book or something is I make a Pinterest board filled with, like, if I know what the character looks like, I will kind of find like celebrities, or just photos, like random photos of people that I feel look like the characters, and places, situations, general aesthetics, locations, outfits, or quotes that you kind of have ideas for. And a lot of times you'll find like more photos that will inspire you and kind of get a plot together, get a story, characters together. The second thing that I do instantly is I make a Spotify playlist. I make a Spotify playlist of songs that either the characters would listen to, or songs that I feel like, sorry, I think my heater's turning on. I was like, what is that? Or just songs that would apply to situations in the book. And especially if you have like romance in your book, or any type of love interest or something like that, there's so many great heartbreak songs or like love songs that can really apply and inspire you. The next thing, if I'm having trouble like trying to find something to even start with, like I don't know where to begin. I mean, starting a story is overwhelming, and sometimes honestly I start off with the characters, but sometimes I start off with like a plot, and so it just kind of depends story to story depending where my super simple and mundane, where I have to really think hard, and I can write anything like about the photo, like where this photo came from, the situation inside the photo, if it's like people, like what are they doing, or I will do it with songs, and the song one is one of my personal favorites. I have written so many, like, okay, I haven't finished a ton of books, but I've started a lot of books, and just gotten a lot of like really good plots, at least they're good to me, based off of like one song or one line in a song. There was a song by Panic at the Disco. If you guys know it, you're gonna be like, okay. But it is Don't Threaten Me with a Good Time. If you guys know the song, it's wild. But there's a line in it. I'm a scholar and a gentleman, and I usually don't fall when I try to stand. And for whatever reason, that just like inspired me, and I used that as the opening line for my like book. I haven't finished it, but it just like, and then like the rest of the song, like it was kind of like this guy was just like at a party. He didn't know how he got there. He's not the party type, and he just woke up and like trying to figure out what happened and like whose house he's at and just things like that. It was a really, really good exercise for me. It sounds a little bit cliche, but like it kind of wasn't when you read it. But anyways, I digress. Or my sister and I, when we're on long car rides, we'll put Taylor Swift on shuffle because her songs have, I don't really like her, but her songs have really great stories in them. So we will take either like just one song and come up with a story, like for the backstory of those characters and kind of the plot going through the song, or we will take one song and that is the opening of the book. That's kind of like part one of the book. Whatever happens in the song, that's what happens. But then we take another song on shuffle of like all her albums, and that's the next sequence of events that happen. And then song 3 will usually do like 5 songs, and it's such a fun exercise, and you don't have to stick totally like to that when you're actually writing it, but it's a really good idea just to kind of practice getting inspiration. So now things for the characters. So you have to remember that sometimes I think the story is very plot driven, but characters drive the plot. If you don't know your character, if you don't have an idea of like who your character is, you are not gonna have a story. Because even if you have like this great like situation, maybe it's like a post-apocalyptic type story and you have a really good idea for it, the story is about the characters and their reactions to that, essentially. And so just knowing and keeping in mind that the characters are the most important thing that you could possibly work on. If you don't know your characters, nothing else is going to work. Like, you have to know your characters so that everything else can fall into place. So get to know them. There are so many questionnaires that I recommend filling out for at least all of your main characters, especially the main character. And like my questionnaire videos that I've done, I actually have a lot of people commenting saying that they use that for their character development, because you know their age, you know their height, you know their birthday, you know their background, you know their family, you know their likes, their dislikes, all of their interests, and it's all like in one place. So I just make up like a Microsoft Word document and I just write any question I can think of. I'll Google them, I'll go on Pinterest. I like as many as you can muster. The more you know your character, the better your story is going to be, because you'll be able to just be consistent in how you're writing, and you'll know them enough to know how to drive the plot forward. Another note on characters is that in the past I have always had an issue with writing characters that were like perfect. They didn't think they were perfect, but everyone else was like, no, you're so perfect, I love you, like why do you question yourself? And nobody likes perfect characters. Perfect characters are not relatable. It doesn't, like, you don't make the story interesting by having a character that is like so good at this and they have no flaws whatsoever. Or like a trope that people really fall into is like, it's this character who's really awkward, but the awkwardness is endearing, and that's the flaw in a way. And to me, that ends up usually being really problematic, because they become very flat characters. There's no dimension, there's no depth, because everybody that you look at has like conceited and self-absorbed, and like I didn't realize I was doing that when I was writing it, but it helped her kind of not become so like one-dimensional, I guess. Like that was her like big flaw. She was like really kind of self-absorbed, and kind of throughout the story, like you'll see her sort of like learning from others and learning from her mistakes and becoming a little bit more like caring towards other people, if that makes sense. I don't know, that's just an example, but awkward is not a flaw. They can also be awkward, but like if that is your only like detriment that they have, and being awkward isn't a detriment, but sometimes we write it like it is. No, and also the people around them also have flaws, and you want to write distinct characters, so every character needs to be different. And a good thing to ask yourself is like, how do these characters like build for each other? Like how do they help each other grow, and in what areas do they have their weaknesses that kind of can sometimes be like a detriment to each other? Like where do they draw each other down, and where do they bring each other up? And I got this quote off of Pinterest. I kind of like paraphrased it because it was really long, but I really liked it. It said, imagine your collection of characters standing together and pose a question for them, something complex such as a moral or political question, and work out how each character would respond. And after you kind of figure out how they would respond, or like what they would respond, you need to ask, how do they respond? Are they confident? Are they shy? Are they hostile? Are they like really steadfast, stick to their guns? Is it kind of like, okay, I could go either way, like, you know, whatever. And you kind of take that and run with it, and their personality will start to show through that. Another thing is that this is something that I have struggled with in every single thing I've literally ever written. Secondary characters need to be important and serve a purpose too. If they don't serve the story in some way or propel it forward, they're not needed. If they're not like unique, cut them, because I cannot tell you how many characters I've had where I have them just so the main character can have friends, but they don't really do anything, and the two characters low-key are kind of exactly the same, just with like different names and like a different style. But you need to like, you know, like every character needs to serve a purpose. If they do not serve a purpose, like a specific purpose, they are not needed, and it's better to get rid of them altogether than it is to have a character just to have a character. This is one of my most helpful tips. I am big into imagination. Like I'm a very imaginative person, very like fantastical and whimsical, and I was also an actress for quite a few years. So this just comes really naturally to me. For some people it can feel really awkward, but it is so freaking helpful, and that is to act out scenes and or interactions as though you are the character, or like it sounds like nerdy, but I'll switch between the characters and have like a literal conversation. I'll like kind of whisper it, and I'll either do this with scenes that I have written, because if I get into that mode where I am that character and I switch to a different character and I'm having this like back and forth conversation with the characters, but like as myself, but as the characters, I can get into both of their heads, and I'll start to realize things in that scene that I'm like, oh, this is how I felt, or like my character felt when like I said this, or I could add this type of description. I could do this instead, but I'll also do it with scenes that I kind of have a vague idea for, or something that I want to do, and you discover so much just naturally having those conversations. And if it's awkward for you, like, do it in your head, do it in the shower. Like, I just do it in my bedroom usually before I go to bed. It helps me relax, and then I turn on ASMR afterwards, and I'll listen to the soundtrack that I have built for it, and it helps me so much, and I learn so much about my character scene work specifically, when writing a scene, it's important to ask, what does this character want? Because ultimately every scene should serve a purpose. Why do they want it, and how do I keep them from getting it? And this is something that I did see on Pinterest, but it has been helpful for me. I tend to kind of just write, because writing is an art form, and it's an expression, and oftentimes it's a reflection of how I'm feeling and things like that. So I can get kind of lengthy and just go off and not have any real direction, which honestly, for a first draft, I read a thing about the first draft is literally just you telling yourself the story. The second draft is kind of making it functional, and the third draft is like finalizing it and making it cohesive and, serve the purpose that it was created to do. But the first draft, honestly, it's been helpful for me to kind of go off, but just in general, it's good to keep in mind, like, where is this scene going? How, every scene, like I said, is driven around the characters. And so what does my character want in this scene? What is happening to them that is so powerful and impactful? And then, as far as writing itself, make sure that you have the balance of showing and telling. And I feel like that's something that everybody always says, but they don't necessarily say, like, how to do it. And so a good thing is to look for words such as felt, was, or is. So, like, she felt sick, rather than saying, like, her stomach began churning, something like that. That wasn't a very good example, but I'm looking for words like felt and replacing that with a more descriptive way to say that she felt sick without outright saying she felt sick. Another thing is was and is. Like, she is pretty. Okay, like, why? Tell me why she's pretty. So just those kind of things, taking moments when you have, like, specific, like, verbs or adverbs, and just being like, okay, does this explain it in the best way possible? Or can I elaborate on that? And, like, once in a while isn't, like, a bad thing, but just keeping in mind, kind of the passive language. Another thing is looking up a feelings chart. If you are writing, like, any type of scene where you need to show any type of emotion, which usually you will in some facet, whether that's excitement, anger, sadness, whatever, you can look up feeling charts on Google, and, like, there will be tons of them. It's basically a giant wheel where you have, like, the primary emotions in the center, and they'll have wedges stemming off, explaining different types of adjectives that stem from that one. So you would have, like, happy as a core emotion, kind of like if you've seen Inside Out. Happy is the core emotion, but the secondary emotions that can follow that, instead of saying happy, you could say excited, hopeful, joyful, cheerful, things like that. And then there's usually another, like a third type of emotions. You can get very, very specific in your, the way that you're explaining how they feel, and it's super, super helpful to also pinpoint when you're not totally sure, and you don't just want to keep saying she was mad. Like, why is she mad? Is it shame? Is it guilt? Is it, like, fear? I don't know, just like those types of things. You can get very descriptive and more accurate with that. Another thing, this is probably, like, number 2 on my advice list, is never, ever, ever delete scenes. Don't delete words. Don't delete anything, even if you cut it from the book itself. Keep it in a separate document or in a separate section where you know that that is, like, you can go back to it, you can read it. But the reason that I say this is, number 1, you can go back and look at it and see where you've improved, how far you've come. You can look at it and be like, okay, I need to improve on this, this is why this scene didn't work. But writing, the more you do it, the better you get. Like, legitimately, the more you do it, the better that you get. And so, just don't stop writing. You see this scene that's not working, don't just delete it. Like, oh my gosh, don't delete it. like, nothing is wasted. No writing that you do, even if you don't end up using it, is not wasted, because you get to know your character more. You get to just play around and have your imagination go wild. Sometimes I'll write scenes that I know for a fact I am not going to keep in my book, but sometimes it starts giving me like other ideas for the characters or for the book, the plot, the setting, like all these things, and it gives me a better grasp to then continue to write, and like, just none of it is ever wasted. And this is also probably like number 3. I struggle with motivation, especially in writing. I get writer's block so much because I have this idea in my head of like this scene that I want to write. I really, really want to, but it's like in the middle of the book, and I'm stuck towards the beginning, and I'm like, well, shoot, I really want to write this middle scene, but I need to like continue to write to get there. No. If you want to write that scene and you're motivated to do it, go write it. You may, and okay, not may, you probably will change it later and edit it and things like that as you move on. But writing a scene that you want to write is so helpful. Like, jumping from scene to scene, that's okay, and you can kind of put it together in an outline when you're done. It is so helpful to not only get to know your character more, so then you can go back and like foreshadow something. For instance, you have this better grasp of your plot. There's so many benefits to actually writing the scene that you want to write, and you're motivated to do it. And that's something that I often struggle with, and I will give up on stories because I want to write this. I already know what happens. I really, really want to write this scene, or when the two characters end up together, that kind of thing. So I stop, because I'm like, well, I can't write it. I have to go chronologically. No, this is your book. This is your story. You can literally do whatever you want. You can break the rules. Look at what works for you. And if you're just not feeling this scene, but you know that you need to write something, write what happens in brackets. Like, the hero has an epic battle and they win by something really clever. Put that in brackets and continue on. Writing is about keeping the momentum going, and if you can do that, do it in whatever way you can. And then general advice that I have is write what you want to read, not necessarily like what would sell. A lot of us write because we want to get published, and a lot of us write just because it's an expression, it's an art form, it's creativity, it's life for us. It's an expression, and I'm like kind of in the middle of it. But I started writing because I literally wrote what I wanted to read. It's funny, I hate reading. I don't like it. I know that I should read because that strengthens your writing skills so much. I just hate it. I write things that I want to read because there's not, like, I'm really picky with books and things that interest me, and it's hard to keep my attention, honestly. So that's why I write. And so if you can just get that going, you can always like edit or change it later, but you need to also have some fun with it, It shouldn't feel like it has to be a chore. It should be something that you enjoy doing. And I know sometimes that there's discipline and you have to write even when you don't feel like it, but just writing what you want to read, not what you think other people are wanting to read, not what you think, this person wants from you, or what you think would be popular, what you think would sell. Write from your soul and write what you genuinely would love reading. Because in the beginning, especially, the only person that matters when writing is you. I also would say get opinions. Now, writing is a very, very, very vulnerable thing. I only share my writing at certain points with people that I really, really trust and that I don't mind seeing me vulnerable, because it's a very, it sounds weird, but it's a very intimate thing for me. But sometimes it can be helpful to get a second opinion, or hey, do you ship these two characters together? What can I do differently? Just getting some feedback, general feedback. Constructive criticism can be incredibly, incredibly helpful. If you want to keep it private, that's okay too. I keep a lot of my stuff private, but sharing or asking opinions, go for it. I think it can be really helpful. Okay, this is also top 3. I know I've already listed 3, but let yourself be surprised and go where the story goes this idea of what I want, where I want it to go, where I want the characters to go, what I want them to do. And the more I'm writing it, the characters don't do what I want them to do because it feels forced all of a sudden. The way that the scene flows, it doesn't feel right to have them do that thing that I once wanted them to do, and that is okay. Your story will evolve. It will evolve and it will change. And if you really, really are stuck on this and you want it to go this way, I recommend that you look at the story, like objectively, you look at it and say, at what point does this start to feel weird? Like, why? What is stopping me from making this feel natural? At what point does it start to feel forced? And kind of looking at it and being like, well, okay, why? And what can I do to fix that? What can I do to change it? But ultimately, I really, really suggest that you just let your imagination go where it wants to go. People always think it's funny when I say, like, oh my gosh, I'm so frustrated. My character did not do what I wanted them to do. They ended up with this person. They weren't supposed to fall in love with them, and all of a sudden they're doing this, and they were supposed to fall in love with this person. And they're like, but you're the writer. Like, you can make them do that. You're like, they're like so confused. And it's like, it's a thing with writers, and a lot of people, if they're not writers, they don't understand it. But letting the characters go where they want to go is so, so, so important for a natural story. And I promise that if it surprises you, it's going to surprise the reader. If you know everything and know every place that it's going to go, the reader, there's a good chance that they might know that too, and they're going to, see all these different things kind of piled together. But sometimes we foreshadow in our minds and on the paper, and we don't realize it until we're like, oh my gosh, wait a second, because kind of like our subconscious knows what we're doing, and it pieces together these things that the audience probably isn't noticing, but your brain is like, oh yeah, they're gonna do this, or yeah, he remembered that she liked this one coffee, and then he got it for her, and then all of a sudden she's like, oh, that's really nice, and they're in love, just things like that. Just letting it go where it feels natural and where you feel led, and let the characters take the lead, because it is about them at the end of the day. There's something that I learned in my creative writing class on that note, and it's gonna sound really weird at first, but it's a quote. I forget who it's by. I think it's like Oscar Wilde or someone like that, or like that. I don't know, some like famous author. But it's like, in writing, you have to kill off your babies. Writing is, like I said, such a personal thing. It's very, very intimate. It's very personal to us, and we hold on to things sometimes that don't serve the story because that's what we want. That's what we wanted this entire time. It hurts us to think about getting rid of this character, this scene, this, whatever it is, this situation. And, we have this idea that we have to stick with where we're at, and it literally pains us to think of deleting that or cutting it from the book. But the only way that we can really get good and, refine it is by cutting things out and, quote unquote, killing our babies, killing things that we think is so important to us, but it's not important to the story. Things that we want to keep in, but it just clutters everything up and muddies the plot. It keeps the plot not going, and it confuses us more. You need to slowly gather the courage to be like, okay, this really is not working. Even though I love this and it's so emotional to me, so personal to me, I'm gonna take it out. And you'll notice the story gets a lot better, a lot more concise. It makes more sense. Things like that. Also, it's really helpful to practice other mediums. So like if you're used to novel writing, try writing some poems, try writing a song, try doing like 10-minute go through, try writing in different try writing poetry, just short stories, different things that you're not used to keep your brain like sharp, to keep your mind kind of just like so I wrote a lot of novels, and then I took a creative writing class in college that mainly focused on short stories, which I had never written, and it helped me so much because you have to get an entire story into like book has not been written. It has not been written by you. You are going to put your own unique spin on it simply because you are you, and that person who wrote about this, they do not have the same experiences as you. They do not have the same voice as you, their writing voice. They don't have any of that, and so it can be really fun for you. Like if you really want to write about something, but you're like, it's already been done. Figure out how you can make it your own. Figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are. Play off of that, and kind of, like I said, writing is an expression, and maybe if you're trying to get published, like, do try to think outside the box or make something unique. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like, you also want to write for yourself, and you want to write what you want to write, because that's what keeps us motivated. Or start out writing like whatever cliche it is, and then on your second and third draft, see where you can change it, kind of take some of the cliche out or the tropes out. But I mean, there is a reason that cliches exist, and it's people like cliches. We fall for them every time, kind of thing. So just kind of like keep that in mind. But like the